going to have presentations from the panelists, and for a few minutes have some questions or discussions, and then after that we break to have the discussion groups. I would also like to remind people to check their departure times for the airport. And I want to plead with people to make sure that they check their departure times so that they don't miss their flights. Please, Zianda, let's not miss our flight back home, because it is difficult, it will be difficult for us to help you from this side. After the discussion groups, we're going to have the Pride celebration also outside this venue, and people are encouraged to attend. You're gonna have fun. There's been some few reports about people feeling unsafe in the space. There are utterances that are very unsafe. As the other foundation, we are trying to deal with that situation. We also want to apologize for the violence that we as the other foundation has caused to some of our discussants who are trans people, and we are also addressing that situation. So I want to encourage us to continue with that spirit, where we are free and committed to have this whole process going on as scheduled and as planned, so that we acquire what we have actually anticipated to acquire. So I'm going to allow the panel to begin. Ian Swart is going to be the moderator for this panel, and Ian will introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought someone was going to run across to switch on the mic, but it's on already. Like I didn't say anything. Yes, so hi everyone. Welcome. I'm very aware that this is kind of like the graveyard panel, right? But I promise we'll make it interesting. There's only one more working group after this, and then that's the end of the day. We are going to shift gears slightly during this panel. But before I tell you about our shifting gears, I am going to give Diana, McLean, and Paula 2 very short minutes to each introduce themselves to you very briefly. Diana, why don't we start with you? Tell us about your organization, your country, something that the audience need to know about you.
All right, my name is Diana. I'm a gender non-conforming person. I'm from Zimbabwe. I work with an organization called Paka CPT, which is a lesbian, bisexual, and transsexual organization, mainly with a feminist background. At that organization, I am currently a board member on that organization. I started the movement when I was 18. Now I'm in my late 20s. This is my first Kopano, so I'm super, super humbled that the first time I get to come to this, I get to speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this on?
Okay.
Is this on? Is this on?
It is.
Yeah, my name's McLean Kabwe, and I'm from Zambia. And I am the co-director, or director and co-founder of the organization called the Lotus Identity. It deals with LGBT issues. But also, I'm also working with the National AIDS Council and FHI 360 in Zambia. So I wear 2 hats, or I would do 2 types of jobs, but within the same movement. So I work at the community level and at the policy level.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paula. I'm from Angola. Well, I'm currently trying to balance 3 roles that I have in Angola between working with in a health program for MSM, trans women, and sex workers. At the same time, also trying to balance being a feminist platform and also in a LGBTI organization. This is my first Capano. So I'm very nervous to be here. It's a very new space that I'm learning and very excited to be. And I'm very privileged to be here. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Diana, McLean, and Paula for agreeing to be on this panel. My name is Ian Southey-Swartz. I manage the LGBTI program at the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa. And yesterday there were people, I remember, who said that it is really important for older people in the movement to make room for younger people with great new ideas, and hence you see a very youthful panel in front of you. I think I'm the oldest and I'm mere 26 years old today. So the other foundation is really quick to respond to your suggestions. Shift of gears. We've had 2.5, 3 days of intense discussion. And as a donor, I'll be one of the first to acknowledge that we don't always have enough space to discuss and reflect on what it is that we do. But we've had that. We've had some incredibly intense discussions. We've had very deep discussions. I now need us to get out of discussion mode. This is our last plenary for the day. This is a conversation with 3 panelists and all of you. So this is going to involve all of you. And what we want in this session is your hard, concrete suggestions. Now, if you look at what has been described over the last 2.5 days, we can see how the world is changing very rapidly, and it isn't always changing in our favor. And if I am going to just look at one of the adversaries of us as a movement or as movements out there, the religious right, you can see why we need to act, and we need to act now. So it is common knowledge now that for every one of us doing this work in this room, there are probably 10 conservative Christians out there working against us. So we're outnumbered, and that is our reality, right? There's a brilliant report that was recently released that shows that for every $1 that we spend on LGBTI rights, the religious right outspend us 10 to 1. So they have 10 times more money going into the same issues than we do. And that's just one of the issues that we're pushing against, right? There's so many others. And so the question that we're asking this afternoon is, having listened to each other for 2.5 days, with the unique insights that Diana, McLean, and Paula, that you have, what is it that we need to do differently? Or what is it that we need to do that's completely new to really accelerate the process of getting to a point where we can honestly begin to have a conversation around full equality of LGBTIQA persons, wherever we want to end with our alphabet soup, right? And I don't want you to tell me what others should do. Don't tell me what donors should be doing. I'm a donor, I know what I should be doing. Tell me about what you should be doing in your context, in your country, because there is one person who knows that context well, and that is you. So when we are going to come up with concrete suggestions, tell me from your perspective, people, movement, LGBTI, people in this room and allies, what is it that we need to do differently? What is it that we need to do that is completely new? And even if you dare, what is it that we need to stop doing? But think about it. So I'm going to start with you, Diana. You've been part of many conversations for the last 2.5 days. And you yourself say some of them were really interesting. So what is it that we should be doing differently?
All right. My first thing would be about social media.
Talk to me about social media.
Because we coming from a country like recently, I'll just pay reference to what happened recently. You know, the whole of the world saw Zimbabweans going to the streets to march against our former president. That message that was put out for the millions that were on the streets, whether in Zimbabwe or in their various diasporan countries, the message wasn't sent through the newspapers or through the news. Somebody wrote a WhatsApp message and said, guys, this is enough. We need to go and we need this guy gone. The WhatsApp message was sent to everyone. There was a hashtag on Twitter. People retweeted. People put it on Facebook. No one really called the next person, are you coming? So that we march in solidarity for this guy to go. So that is what our movement needs at the moment. There was someone from Malawi who said yesterday they put the movement on social media and there was a lot of backlash and they left. Obviously there is resistance. Obviously there will be backlash for trying to do that. But sitting and looking at people who are in this room, we are the hashtag generation. So if you want anything changed, there has to have a hashtag. There has to be a retweet. There has to be someone sharing it on Facebook. So the moment that you put something on Facebook, I will tag a friend of mine, even if I'm against it. They will take their own friend, they will take their own friend. So it will, in the end, just raise the awareness. To say, out of 5 people, obviously there might be 3 who are going to shout at you, but there are 2 who are going to then say, oh, I need to know more about this. So instead of shying away, we need to use social media more and more, because now people believe more in what they see more than in what they hear.
I have a quick question to the audience. By show of hands, how many of us are advocating using social? I'm not talking about selfies, and I'm not talking about pictures about your breakfast. I'm talking about advocating via social media. How many of us are really doing it? Okay, that's a considerable group. So my follow-up question before I go to McLean is, when we use social media, and it's clearly important to do it, who are we talking to? Because that religious leader that preached on Sunday that I'm going straight to hell, and that traditional leader who won't give me ground in the village because I'm a homosexual, they're not on social media. So who am I talking to when I use social media?
They are on social media.
Are they? Tell me.
They are on social media. Well, again, I'll talk about, Zimbabweans have a lot of prophets at the moment. We have a lot of prophets, and all of them have Facebook pages and YouTube channels.
Right.
So they're there. They're putting their sermons on social media. So they're there even to look at the comments that are on social media, because everyone wants their voice to be heard, and the medium that is best to use at this time, in this generation we're living in. Even my grandmother, who is 84, is on WhatsApp.
Right.
And when the Wi-Fi in our house goes down, she calls me. She's like, Diana, the Wi-Fi is down. What's going on?
Right.
Then I'm like, Grandma, you 80. What do you want to be on the internet for?
Right. And so, okay, so that is one of our points, right? We need to advocate on social media. And when we go into the working groups, I have a question for everyone in the room. Do we have the language to advocate on social media? Because one of the problems that I have with social media, and my friend Jabu can attest to this, and I'm giving away my age, is that I simply don't have the social media language. When I want to explain a human rights issue, I can't do it 140 characters. I need to do a sermon, right? Because that's simply how I communicate So how do I tell in 140 characters on a tweet How do I tell my story and you still get enough for me to change your heart? Because I think if I tell you what I think in 140 characters, you are not going to have a change of heart. But that is not a question we're answering now. That's what the working groups are for. McLean, you are coming from, and when we have our discussions, please, I'm waiting for Deonce to make an interesting comment. McLean, you come from a very challenging country. I still think your country is an amazing country that starts with Zambia is a Christian nation as the preamble to the constitution. I sometimes battle to see how we are going to accelerate change in a country like yours where it's desperately needed. So what is it that we need to do differently? What is it that we need to do newly?
Okay, with all due respect to all the faiths in the room, but I don't like that declaration. I believe it was made in bad taste, but then that's a topic for another day. So for me, I'll look at, answer your question from the different approach. I'll look at the LGBT community in Zambia. So before the LGBT label, we are Zambians of different races, and we have socioeconomic challenges, just like every other Zambian.
Yeah.
So we've got poverty issues, we've got job creation, economic empowerment. We also go through, just like everyone else, a very dysfunctional democracy, or a joke of a democracy that we have in the country. And we have accountability issues, governance issues within the country. But then as LGBTI community, do we take part in those processes? Are we participatory in those processes? Or do we just sit in our little corner and watch everyone else get involved? So for me, that's my entry point. Recently, I think maybe a month ago, I think there was a scandal in government. So government purchased 42 fire trucks to the tune of $42 million, $1 million each for a fire truck.
Right.
And of course, the citizens were in a uproar about this misappropriation of public funds. And we are all taxpayers who were angered, naturally. And of course, citizens galvanized themselves to protest against this misappropriation of funds by the government. And for me, the missed opportunity there was that we never got involved as LGBTI. So what am I getting at? So when you go to the religious fraternity, when they look at the LGBT, all they see is sex, all they see is demon-possessed individuals. They don't see us as taxpayers. They don't see us as employers. They don't see us as employees, as brothers and sisters, as people who come from real families, as people who have got brothers and sisters and got parents who also get hurt when all these negative rhetoric is coming from the pulpit. So for me, that's an entry point. If we start showing that responsibility as LGBTI into these spaces, corruption, governance issues, we get to participate in those issues. Imagine if the LGBT consortium, LGBT group in the country got involved in some issues that the church was also involved in. Maybe GBV. We're talking about child defilement.
Yeah.
All these are sensitive issues within the country. If we add a voice to that, imagine how much shift would happen.
So I have a quick question for you. I hear you when you say, as LGBTI people, we should engage in national conversations. We should be talking about poverty alleviation. We should be talking about what the nation is talking about. Are you able, as a person who identifies differently in Zambia, are you able to openly enter that space as a gay man, as a lesbian woman? How do you make your contribution count if you're part of that conversation but still hidden? Because we are part of those conversations in many countries, but we're not out. And so are we contributing then to making the shift?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. So for me, as a movement, when we go to that space, of course, we won't identify as LGBT. But that small step is part of the whole bigger strategy of building allies. So for instance, I'll go back to the 42 million fire trucks. My Zambian, I'm sure they know about that. So when we go into that space, You go there as an ally. You're talking about these issues. And I'm glad to say that during that conversation, a lot of youths participated. So when you go into that space and you talk about the issues that are affecting all of you, and during that process, you start to build personal relationships with those people that are there, directors or policymakers, that are involved. Even at a later stage, when you start bringing about your own issues, not in relation to the 42 million fire trucks, maybe in a different space. And then they remember this particular individual spoke about this issue. This particular organization talked about this issue. And then you start building that allyship with a bigger group.
I have one more question for you before I go on to Paula, please. How do I get that religious leader, the traditional leader, the politician, how do I get to see that person? How do I get that person to see me as more than just a sexual being? How do I get them to see me as a taxpayer, as an employer, as somebody supporting my family, as somebody positively contributing to Namibian, Zambian, Zimbabwean, Angolan society? How do we make that connection?
I think for me, the biggest mistake that we've made, I know mistake is a big word, as a movement, even within the region, is that we have created this divide between ourselves and the religious community. We look at the religious community as those people who speak against us, as those people who hate us. But then what we forget most times is that spirituality is something that you cannot run away from as an individual. Even as LGBT people, we need religion. We need that connection to the higher being. And that is the common thread that should, that should be there. So even when you go into that space as LGBT persons, because most times we forget that even within our community as LGBT, there are a lot of Christians, there are a lot of LGBT who are in that faith. And those are resources that we should use to connect to the religious fraternity.
So I hear two things from you. A, claim your religion, be there, be present. And I also hear, be part of those discussions that are happening. Give your input. If a bill is being drafted about child protection, make sure people know you are there, right? So, and that is just an extreme example, but I'm using it because that is something that actually happened in Namibia, where one of the LGBT organizations gave feedback on a bill around maintenance. And the question was, so why would pedophiles be interested in maintenance issues? But it gives you an opportunity to have a discussion, right? And get beyond the pedophilia, hopefully, get beyond the pedophilia conversation. But I absolutely agree with you. Paula, you come from a country where change is happening rather rapidly at the moment. How do we, as the LGBTI movements across Southern Africa, how do we make that change happen rapidly for us from your perspective?
I think in this past 2.5 days, we have spoken about social media, which is very clear that we need to use social media. And I think when we talk about social media, they came out time to time in so many conversations that we had during those 2 days. I feel like we are there. Almost all of our organizations have Facebook page, but sometimes, first of all, we need to understand what are the tools that we need to use in our contest. Diana was talking about Twitter. For example, in Angola, Twitter is it's not used by the community. So we use WhatsApp if we have money to charge our phones. But mainly we use Facebook because we have free Facebook.
Right.
So, and then how do you manage the content if people have free Facebook and then you don't, for example, in Facebook, you don't want to just put long messages because you want people to interact and engage with your page. How do then, which tools do you use to make people interact more with your pages? So I think we have spoken a lot with the narrative, about the narrative. We have questioned the what, but we are not questioned how and where. So when I'm referring about the how, I'm talking about how are we using these tools to to publicize our messages and change the narrative that is out there.
Right.
And I will give an example in our page. We use Lambda, and I was always talking to Karina during these 2 days because we use Lambda as reference. Because we feel we need to interact, and we're trying to engage with a young audience that they are not able to see the images on Facebook, but they are able to read. So you need to understand how to engage with this audience that, first of all, they are not able to see images, but also they are not gonna read long texts. So you need to learn how to go about to create that content on Facebook. And the other thing that I feel is missing in our conversation, how do we interlink the social media with the other things that we are doing, mobilization, capacity building, and advocacy? So you can use social media for advocacy. So how do you interlink social media and mobilization, for example? And I can give a very practical example on this. Recently, we organized, because I'm also from a feminist platform in Angola, and we recently organized a march for violence against women. So what we did, we had to create 2 ways to engage with people. Because, like you said, some people are not on Facebook. And even if they are, they don't know how to engage in different pages, and sometimes they don't know how to engage on Facebook. So we need to create a strategy where you can interlink with people who are using Facebook and get out of Facebook also. So what we decided to do, so we interlink the events and everything we were doing on Facebook with our mobilization. But then it comes again, one of the topics that was brought out during these 2 days, language. So in Facebook, you are using a very specific language. And then when you go to mobilization, you can't use the same language. For example, for our march, we had to go to speak with zongueiras, you know, the ladies who sell food on the street. So when you go there, you're not going to talk about, oh, we are feminists, this is what we are claiming. They're not going to understand. So you need to interlink with them in a different level, in a different kind of language that they're going to understand, and understand how they can be part of that march also. So we had different groups for mobilization, and we have different groups also for Facebook. So, but everything we were sharing on Facebook, it was also interlinked with our mobilization. For example, the chantings during the march. For example, everything that was happening during mobilization, if we were doing mobilization in some place in a market in Luanda, we would do videos and then post it on Facebook so people can see that we are expanding the audience to that march. So I think that's one of the topics that we are not talking. How we use not only social media as a single tool, but how do we interlink the social media as a tool with the different things that we are already doing, especially mobilization, capacity building.
So I hear both you and Diana and the power of social media. I'm very aware of the fact that we want to have a conversation. I'm going to go to the audience soon. I have a question for all 3 of you that I literally want you to answer in a sentence or 2. So we now know the importance of social media. We know how powerful it can be as a tool. We know that we can reach people across different generations. What about traditional media, either printed or electronic? Should we still be spending our energy there? Is it still something that can shift the needle? And if it is, how do we engage with it differently?
Yeah,
I'll go
first. So for me, from Zambia, I'll talk about the relationship that we have with the National AIDS Council as a country. And this is as a result of years of lobbying, of advocacy as LGBTI groups in Zambia, using the public health strategy. So starting, I think, 3 years ago as the KP organizations, and stemming from that is that we are all part of now consultative processes in terms of engaging with the media, especially in the last 3 weeks when we had very negative media reports in the print media and electronic media.
Yeah, we saw it when we were there.
Including the state-owned media.
Yeah.
And of course, the articles that were coming out of these newspapers or print media was that there was promotion of homosexuality, as it is, as they like putting it popularly.
Yeah.
So for us, even as NAC, in the past, maybe NAC wouldn't have taken an interest in this. But because we work together, and because NAC and the KP communities work together under the National HIV/AIDS Strategic Framework, which also includes key populations. And this NACIF, in short, also includes, under the KP definitions, include gay men, men who have sex with men, transgender people, and sex workers. So these articles were directly attacking these groups. So what we did because for me, as I said, I'm a KP advisor at the NAC, at the National AIDS Council. So in a way, I'm directly working with the government in ensuring that there's access to health services for key populations. So we sat down with NAC. I was part of that team. Do we engage with the Daily Mail and Daily Nation, these two national papers. So for me, when I look at that besides social media, even print media, even traditional media also has an effect.
Right.
And I'm hopeful that there will be a shift in terms of reporting. Of course, it's just a beginning.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
To Paula and I want to ask you the question slightly differently. So you both nodded your heads when I asked the question, if there's space for traditional media, is there space for us in traditional media beyond the health conversation? Because I don't always want to be a pathologized creature, right? I actually want the media to talk to me beyond my health issues. I'm more than just the possible carrier of HIV, right? So is there a place where we can engage with traditional media that is beyond health? I mean, part of the reason why that works is because the National AIDS Council is involved, right? Is there a Human Rights Council that can get involved, that can pull us into a different sphere when the traditional media, when they speak about us? Or is it always going to be a health conversation?
Coming from a country whereby the media is heavily politicized and it's state-owned, what is printed in the newspaper really is basically what the state wants to be printed there.
Right.
Yes. Zimbabwe is a highly patriarchal country, which is very homophobic, simply because of the utterances of our former president. So the only time you will see a story which has LGBTQI is in the local tabloid paper, H Metro, simply because they have uncovered, somebody discovered, or somebody took pictures, or somebody took messages of same-sex relationship, and they just want to sensationalize it. They want to sell the paper. So, and the probably only other time you would see a message in the newspaper would girls or whatever organization would have forked a lot of money just to have an insert in the newspaper, of which that is amounting to more than $1,500 to get an insert with a couple of words, less than even 200 words, to come out there to say, Girls has said this. So if we are wanting to get a message all the time in the newspaper, where do we find $2,000 every time we want to get 200 words in the newspaper in Zimbabwe?
Right. It is, yeah, and we're talking about how we do things differently. I'm not even sure that's a sustainable way of doing it, right? If we have to buy our space in newspapers, if we have to buy our space on the air, we are going to be bankrupt within 1 month. So I'm still. Paula, your country, I believe, has a very famous transgender singer who has really, a transgender pop star who's really changed perceptions and have used traditional media to do so. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I think we have been able to get out on the health conversation. So because of Titika, the transgender, she is a kuduro musician, we started having more visibility on media. So the conversation is getting out of the health team. So people are now inviting LGBTI people to go to television, to radio, to talk about homosexuality, what is homosexuality in Angola. But we actually had a work group to talk about media. And one of the things that came out about media is sometimes you go to these spaces and it's a trap because sometimes you go there and the journalist has already his own agenda about how you're going to be interviewed and how you're going to tell the story. So one of the things that came out from the media work group was we need to talk about preparation. We need to talk about training. We need to talk about, as LGBTI activists, we assume that we also, we know how to talk about these things. And one of the things that was proposed by the group is we need training for both. We need training for us and we need training for the journalists. So we start engaging in a more honest way when we go to traditional media. And something that Mokini was saying about allies, one of the things that we need to start creating in traditional media are allies. And a little bit that's what we just spoke about just 2 days, it's how do we open our gates and get out from just talking about LGBTI issues and interlink with our other struggles so we can create allies in different spaces. So I feel like journalists are also, we can start creating that relationship, but we need to come out in a way that we both need to be trained about it, we both need capacity about it, to go around this and expand the topics that we need to talk about, and how we're gonna talk about these issues in this, in TV, in radio.
Right. So, in brief, let's find ways of using social media to advantage. Let's reshape our messages so that it's actually suitable for social media. Let's be part of national, of local conversations. Let's make sure our voices are heard there. Let's make sure that we claim our spaces, those religious spaces where we have, by the sound of it, removed ourselves from, right? More than so. And then let's find those allies. So I am going to go to the audience because we're working on a bit of a timer here. I don't necessarily always want you to ask a question to the panelists. What I would want you to do is to very shortly tell us what you think, where you come from, something can be done that's different, or something that can be done in a new way that will help us achieve our advocacy goals faster.
I'm a bit challenged. Yeah, I'm sitting here and I have ideas that are coming in. So my take will be, we are discussing all these things. We have newspapers, we have social medias, we have our pride marches, we have everything. But then we never stopped to look into the priorities within our countries. What is it that Lesotho is looking into? Is it the issues of cross-border? Is it the issue of poverty? Is it the issue of HIV? Or what is the real issue that these people are looking into? And then how best can I penetrate through that issue for my voice to be heard? How best can I elevate the issues that concerns the communities that I come from or the society? Also putting my agenda forward. So I think we have to think about understanding the local issues and then the strategies and trying to penetrate through the existing systems and agendas. Thank you.
And what TP has prevented Matrix from doing exactly that? Why have you not done that analysis and gone there yet?
Actually, we have been trying to penetrate, but then the challenge, I think, for now, has been wherever we have been invited in, was we saw it as a platform for us to sensitize people, not only to also consider the issues of concern of people, of the communities. So now as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, yeah, I've been stupid enough to see this area. So now it is my responsibility to voice out with the communities or the village members to make sure that, yes, I become part of, I am part of the society. And then I have, beyond my gender identities and sexualities, I'm also part of the society. And then I also suffer the same stuff that they are suffering. So I have to incorporate the issues that affect me as the person together with the issues of the society. I don't know.
I
but
hear
that's
you.
me.
I
Yeah.
absolutely hear you. Danilo, what do we need to do differently?
Okay, I think that in most Southern African countries, there are community radios, which OSISA funds lots of them.
We do.
A media program. And I think that because those radios have a proximity with the community, we could use them or work with them to send our message across, because as you said, it's unsustainable for us as activists to be paying cash, large amounts of cash, to place our ads or news in the newspaper. In another hand, I think that we also have to reflect, as much as social media is a tool to mobilize people, we also have to go back to our stats and see what is the penetration of internet in Southern Africa. Apart from Namibia, which is 27%, and South Africa, most of our countries are in the range of 2 to 7%.
Correct.
It means that 7% of the population are reachable by social media. And then we have to consider issues such as the price of smartphones. And we should combine all with traditional. I'm not saying that we shouldn't just shift from the social media, but then we have to be more realistic and using technologies that are close to the people, such as, someone talked about the Tamagotchi phones, and yes, most of people use those phones, but...
Right.
Okay.
Are there other hands? Yes, please. Let's go to Linda, and then here in the front. Whose hand has been up? I'm so sorry, I'm coming to you.
I think for me I would like us to extend the conversation broadly to communications, because I see media as one aspect of communications. And I think when we extend the conversation to that, we need to look at issues of direct and indirect communications that are visible and invisible. And I think what we've been looking at the media, it's the direct and indirect forms of change it brings to us. I think as a movement, we have not advanced dialogue around what communications means for our organizations individually, and what is it that we are putting out to the people that we are reaching out. And I think that's the crust around where we need to start, because we can take stock of so much that has happened in our countries, but we haven't even thought collectively as a Southern Africa to think about, for instance, a stigma index that would guide the form of communications and needs of our people, and also gives us an idea what is the index in our countries around homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia, and all the other phobias that we are looking at. But I think the dialogue should start from that premise, because I think we have narrowed ourselves very much to a media as the only form of communications, but we don't realize community dialogues are forms of communications, are old traditional forms of engagement. And I think that is the fast forward that we need to look at. Thank you.
That is a very good point. Reaching our community face to face has always worked, right? Especially in countries where we still need to reach our communities.
Well, what I've done, not necessarily in the LGBTI space, but in the space where I work in, I introduced citizen journalism. I work for Love Life, and then I train the groundbreakers to use either their cell phones or cameras that we buy for them to capture stories around the country. We also invested in pull-up screens, and we are fortunate as an organization because we get money from the government. So I was doing two things: to capacitate young people to be able to be producers of their narratives, and they're able to shape that how the community sees or hears issues of young people. But again, in terms of community screenings, you know, I was trying to put like faces to challenges. You know, when we talk about GBV, I remember we were doing one program with the UNFPA, and we were concentrating on like forced marriages. And the community, because it doesn't or hasn't heard the voice of these young girls that are being forced into these marriages and are exposed to HIV because someone, you know, is sleeping with the girl and they've been in the towns. For the first time, they could see the face and the expression was louder. I found that to work, it increases audience in terms of like the cinema strategy, because there was a need to develop audiences that had the appetite for local content. So that worked. And in terms of using radio, like mass media communication, depending on the mercy of radio stations to cover your content can be challenging. So what I do is that I budget for that, first to create appetite for my content so that when I can no longer buy the air, and then the community radio stations or SABC that gave us 3 million just now for the 16 days of activism and some money for thinking through the SABC Foundation. So the crux of the story is that if you can get a funder that is interested in buying your media like the airtime, do that, because in that way then you are able to dictate to SABC and say, I want a producer's workshop. I want to workshop producers on my content, on how I want my content to be handled. And then you drive your agenda because you've bought that space. If you move away maybe after 6 months and the content was that powerful, they start giving you space. So I don't know whether like we could, you know, sort of try and work around these strategies if they could work in the sector or not, but they've worked very well where I work.
Right. Let's go here and then we'll go there.
Okay, for us, what we are planning to do in some of the things that we have done in Zimbabwe are like, one, we no longer knock on the doors of other meetings because sometimes we are not wanted in those meetings. So what we usually do is that if we hear from our colleagues, since we do sympathize with them when they are doing their own programs or solidarity work, we just barge in. That's one of the things. Then also we looked at, we are more focused on HIV and AIDS. but we have social life. Then some of what we do is we equip the community with information. Whether you are in whatever area you are, in rural area, participate in any program that is in that village or in that area or in that town. So how do they participate? They make up teams. They go into social aspects like sports, soccer. It doesn't mean officially that they have to be all LGBTI team, but they have to be also a mixture of a team. Then also, how do we do it? To those who go to church, participate in the church space. It doesn't mean who you are, you can participate. You can be in the choir. You can do anything in the church. So it's almost like we are training them to do something in their own communities. Then also, we look at ways, there are entry ways in Zimbabwe that we have found, which is easier for us to advocate for whatever we want, is the women. Women are the power. Why are we saying women they have the power? Because majority of men don't go to church. So when we enter like China, we have what we call China Thursday. When women meet, we are there as well. Like we talk about some issues, we are like facilitating, then we enter our own issues into those spaces. So it's almost like we are in solidarity with albino, people who living with albino, and also people living with disabilities. Because it's almost like when we talk about the LGBTIQ, we are looking at people who are not disabilitated, or we are looking at people who are not albino. We have a lot of people who are leaving behind. So we are like, we go to their spaces, we talk to them, and we identify some of the members, and others will just join in privately. So that's how we work with.
And what you say is so important. I mean, as the LGBTI community, as the LGBTIQ community, we certainly understand stigma, we understand discrimination, and yet we are not shy to leave others behind. The point was that was just made, right? And I'm wondering if do things, we're so much weaved into this whole KP conversation, but we're still siloed. So I'm wondering about it. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and gender non-conforming. So my thing is, I think we are thinking of a much more complex of reaching magnitudes of people. In my books, I think systems are built in everyday lives. Like, we start here with me and the next person. I don't need to reach somebody else that is far from me. I need to start here. And if I am bold enough to speak up for the things that I believe in to the people that are really close to me, it's easy for me to transfer information. What do I mean? Start conversations with little things. Take, for example, TV programs. You are watching soapies at home. Something comes up. Don't shy away from engaging with the people that are trying to understand, and you can clearly hear that they do not understand. Start there. They will tell somebody else. Somebody else will tell somebody else. While we are still busy trying to get the money to get that airplay from the radio, somebody else has heard something that is worth listening to. So I was just trying to get you to think of it in a simplistic approach.
I wonder if that isn't a very South African thing. I mean, every South African soapy right now either has a gay person or a trans person or an intersex person or a person who's gender non-conforming in it. But I must be honest with you, I've not seen it outside of South Africa, unless I am just ignorant about it. But yes, we have another hand here, please. And then, unfortunately, we're going to do a wrap-up session because I want to get back to the panel.
So I'm sitting here and I'm slightly challenged because it seems like we're getting stuck on communications and media, and I'm wanting to think, as you said, out of the box. I wonder, if we want to affect faster, deeper change. In our context in South Africa, at least, I know that a couple of years ago we had the JWG. JWG results in the other foundation. We know that there was the Kaleidoscope Youth Network, and that was doing the youth work of networking. But I think that when those two shut down, we left a very big gap in our sector. We don't talk to each other anymore. We have events on the same days. We want to go to 4 marches on one day. Every organization will do their own march, where we could be taking 4 marches into one place and having a collective impact. These are the things that I wonder about when we're talking about change, because I'm wondering, at what point do we start noting the gaps? They are there and they are stark. And here, broken record, people are laughing in the session, I'm saying the same thing. There are problems, there are elephants in the room that we aren't addressing. There are gaps even here that need to be spoken about, but this is not the space to do so. So when do we create that space? Because that's what's going to drive change. If we don't know what the problem is, we can't address the problem.
Right. There was a hand right at the back. And then I am going to return to the panel. And I want you to, in the meantime, think about what is that one out-of-the-box thing that if you had the money and the opportunity, you would do?
Hello, everyone. And when I think about the next step in terms of accelerating change, I really think of community engagement. Because when you look at it, we are trying to appeal to those people who have stigmatized us. And the first question that they probably ask, even when I try to empathize with them, is what value are we giving them? Because often at times, yes, we do marches, yes, we do awareness campaigns, but what valuable activities have we engaged with? Like on issues which don't even have to do with the general LGBTI, but probably issues to do with the general environment in our respective countries, the general movements which are affecting other KP groups. Because if I personally, for me, I would say my advocacy has really been action-oriented. Like I've grown to be accepted because I've shown that I'm valuable. I've shown that even though I'm stigmatized, I will still respect you, I'll still forgive you, I'll still try to hold you up when you need me. So these are some of the initiatives that the general public also want from us. So we really need to think about how are we going to engage our different communities, seeing the world from their point of view.
Thank you. So Paula, let me start with you. You have access to a certain pot of money. And I say, Paula, I need you to do something innovative with this money. Something that's going to be different, something that's going to make a change. What would it be?
I'm towards 2 things. The current need that, and it was something that we have been speaking about for 2 days now. How do we respond to the other needs that we have as a community? And in our organization, what we have been doing is we have been using one of the members of our organization, she has an association that has trainings and courses but are more arts related. So what we are doing is feeding on education, on arts, but again, it's the same areas that we are still feeding in. And then we are trying to connect those courses with job creations. So what we do is just people go to courses, and after courses, they become trainers, and they are paid for that job. Right. So the idea is to expand that to different areas, because people have needs, not only... Trans women don't want to only work in as a hairdresser, or fashion designer. People have other interests. So we want to expand that. Yeah. So if I had money, yes, to expand that, to create different education areas and feed that to job opportunities. Right. The second thing would be, for me, we talk about a lot about language. And for me, coming from an African Portuguese country, we struggle with information because there's no content, LGBTI content in Angola. So what happened is we have seen the movie on Sunday, I think, and great. I could understand because I can read subtitles and I know how to speak English. But a lot of the LGBTI people in Angola don't know how to speak English. So how do we use, and again, I think arts here is a major, plays a major role. How do you use the different tools that we have in arts? And again, I think we are always using the same tools in arts also. How do you expand those tools to go further beyond the language barrier? I will give you an example. The movie, the first thing that came to my mind, yes, I want to take this movie to Angola, or some other movie that it has been showcasing all over our region. But how do I go about for the language? And one thing that I was reading about, it was live cinema, where you can create, you don't need the sound and the subtitles. You can have a group telling the story of the movie in the language where you showcase in the movie. And you can have also the sound that would make a more identifier with the movie that you're showcasing. Right. So what I'm saying, why don't we expand also how we use in arts to actually, yes, thank you.
Yes.
To go further these barriers that we have. I'm talking about specific one because I think this is the most present one for me, which is the language because of information. So for me, if I had money, it would be these two things.
Right. So I hear you. So art, but not just to create jobs, but actually art to advocate.
Yes.
Yeah. So McLean, you have a pot of money. You need to come up with a new, brilliant idea that's going to excite donors. What's it going to be?
Depends on how much money you're giving me. Yeah, but seriously, when I look at Zambia with its religious background, the attitudes, perceptions about LGBT, and I look at social media hashtags, I'm not sure if it will work. When you look at movies and the like, I'm not sure if it will work. I say so because spaces in which to talk about LGBT issues are completely closed off. You'll be accused or you'll be charged with promotion of certain activities.
Yeah.
So for me, I'll still stick to the traditional approach. And the traditional approach that has worked in Zambia is the easiest, is the public health approach. Earlier on, I talked about the National AIDS Council, which is the arm of the government. For us, that is our biggest entry point as the KP, as the LGBT movement in Zambia. And already we're talking about a major strategy as National AIDS Council with consultation from the KP community.
Right.
So for me, that's the biggest entry point. And this media strategy, it's not one-off. Of course, it will start with creation of media guidelines. So we want to engage the media houses. We also want to engage with the media training institutions about around KP issues, but from a public health perspective. When we had a discussion with the media houses following those reports, of course we talked about how it is important not to leave anyone behind in the HIV response at the country level. And I think that's the biggest entry point for us. They were able to accept from that perspective because they know that it is best or it is guided by the NACIF, National AIDS Strategic Framework, which is endorsed by the government. So for us, when it comes from that angle, it's kind of legitimized.
Right.
It's not just coming from elsewhere. And it's been championed by the National AIDS Council. So for us, when we engage the media, it's about the end point is that every time that they want to release an article in the media, of course we work together with them. Something contentious concerning the LGBT issue, we want to work together with them so that the correct messaging goes out there. Not to kill their business, because we realize that good news doesn't sell papers. But it has to be informative, educative, all those things. So that's the strategy that we're going to use as a country.
I don't think we need to be afraid of failing, right? Because we won't know something works until we've tried it. So I don't think we must be so averse or afraid of failing. If you learned a good lesson from your failure, is it a failure? So I hear you. I hear the KP conversation. My problem is still that those KP populations are valued differently, right? It is much easier for me to make a case around disability or a case around the girl child than it is about the rights of LGBTI persons. So I want to think about, I hear you that KPs are way in, but how do we get people to treat those key populations more equally? We value the issues that are brought up by those more equally.
Can I just respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah. So when we start working on these social media or media articles about LGBT in an objective light, the goal is to ignite conversations in the country around KP issues.
Right.
Which is a sensitive area and which is hardly reported on. If ever it is reported on, it's in a negative light. But then we want something objective, a feature article in the main paper.
Yeah.
And that will have offshoot of people creating conversations around this issue. So that if you find an article or you find an item being discussed on TV, we're talking about these issues in an objective way. Even if it's based on a health perspective, of course, in the long term, it will seep onto other areas.
Yeah.
We want to paint the LGBT community as just people.
Right.
We don't want to be seeing them as sexual deviants
Right.
or something else. We want an LGBT person who's Zambian is just a normal human being. That's the end point. So this is a starting point from a human rights, from the public health perspective. That's our starting point. It's a long-term process.
I hear you.
Yes.
So I want to be seen as a normal human being without being denied who and what I am, right?
Yes.
I think that's important. Diana, you're the last one before we close the session. There's some money. I need something innovative from you. What is it?
Are there limitations to that?
Your imagination is the limitation. Talk to me.
Okay, so if I had money, how I would actually drive the change? Because at the moment, the visibility is there. The allies are there. What is not there at this moment in time is the usage of our parents, the LGBTQI plus parents. We haven't engaged our parents enough to use them even as in our advocacy. We can actually sensitize our parents. You know, we can document the parents that are supportive, right? We document them. We can actually put through the challenges, even their thoughts that we're doing. Because so far, I'm sure there isn't even that much documentation in the Southern African region of it. Because the thing is, the information that's there is not in our African context, right? Because we find even in churches, there are churches whereby you can see there's our prophetess, our prophetess's 3 wives. But if I did that, then it's now labeled something different, right? If we go to the African traditional, especially in Zimbabwe, we have spirit mediums, right? I'm a lady. Okay. I'll be female, right? But if I'm a spirit medium in Zimbabwe, and I have my girlfriend or my wife, they accept that. Why? Because I'm a spirit medium. I'm important. I'm the person who's between the ancestors and the living world.
Yeah.
You know. So these things are happening. Right? So we take our parents, they can be our loudest voice.
Yeah.
If we are willing to use our parents.
Yeah.
Because our parents are the ministers in church. They are decision makers in their companies. They're influencers even in legislative stories. To say, these are our children. I accept my child for who he, she, they, it is.
I hear you.
Yes. And they are more than sexual sex beasts, like someone said. It's like LGBTIQ people are seeing as sex beasts.
Yeah.
We have to show ourselves, even in the messaging. We discussed earlier on that in the messaging is not all about what people are reading or the pictures that they're seeing. If gay people, lesbian women, trans men are in a small space, or they're put in a space, we are well known for, 1, substance abuse, 2, we're like too vocal, 3, we like to, what you call it, to, if someone wants to talk to you, is provocative, right? Now that's the message that we ourselves as the LGBTI communities are putting out there to people.
Right.
Yeah. So I would also like to put money in wellness. To say, we're working with people who are depressed, who are stressed, but there are no programs towards the wellness of us in the LGBTI communities.
Yeah.
To say, I'm probably depressed. That's why I'm going out there, I'm using substances, and I'm abusing alcohol. Nobody really sits down to say, probably if we were to check the stress levels of everyone in here,
right,
you'd be surprised to say, so what we have been doing the past 2.5 days, because we're working with people, we're thinking we are healthy, our bodies are okay, our minds are okay.
Yeah.
But that is not it. So if I had money, I would put it in those two things, working with parents and wellness.
I want to agree with you that as a community, as communities, we're really bad at self-care. But I want to say to you also, I'm not sure if I better self-care that I would choose to drink less wine. I'm not sure if Whitney better self-cares if she's going to be any quieter. I hope not.
Not this time.
Right? But self-care is important. But people, as I wrap this up, I'm asking myself, and we're going into working groups, and I really need the out-of-the-box thinking in the working group. What did not come up in this conversation that I hope would come up on this? Nobody mentioned whether we should be doing anything at SADC level. Is it a waste of time? Is this an organ that we want to work with? Is the African Commission, does it have value for us, right? Do we want to go to the AU? I'm asking, I'm not saying, right? We spoke about poverty, we spoke about how we are affected, that intersection of being LGBTI and poor. Who in this room is talking to trade unions? Is that a conversation we should be having? Again, I'm not saying, I'm asking. So what are those things that could really push our agenda forward that we are currently not doing? And I don't have the answer. I have many questions. I hope you have as many questions as we have. And I hope you will take it in the working group, where you're going to grab your coffee, something to eat, and go straight into your working group, please. I think Virginia is going to talk to us about the working groups. I want to say thank you to Paula, to McLean, to Diana for a lovely panel. Thank you. You've been very gracious panelists. Thank you.